Hi. In this video, we're going to continue our quest to understand motivation through several other theories. To start off, though, we're going to start talking about two basic types of motivation in order to start talking about one of the theories we're going to address in this video. So there are two kinds of motivation. One is intrinsic motivation, which has to do with when you like an activity just for the sake of doing it itself. So if you're intrinsically motivated to engage in woodworking, for example, you're not doing it because of money that you might receive for the actual woodworking product that you make. If you're intrinsically motivated to engage in woodworking, you're doing it because you enjoy the process of doing woodworking, and so you feel like you would do it, just for fun. There's not you're not doing it for somebody else. You're not doing it for rewards you might receive. It's just something you enjoy doing. By contrast, extrinsic motivation refers to when you're motivated for what you're going to get that involves an external outcome. So whether that is pay, whether that is the recognition of someone else, some kind of rewards that you might receive external to what the actual, let's say, woodworking that you're receiving, that you're engaged in, that involves extrinsic motivation. So these are the kinds of motivation, but we can also think of intrinsic rewards as the rewards you get from being engaged in intrinsic motivation. And extrinsic rewards also refers to what you get reward-wise from extrinsic motivation. So this is going to be important as we try to understand cognitive evaluation theory, which is next. Cognitive evaluation theory is a fascinating theory, really, because it flies in the face of some practices in organizations. In a lot of organizations, there's an idea that if we offer bonuses or if we increase pay for something, that this is going to be what drives motivation. According to this theory, when you provide people with extrinsic rewards for something that they already like to do, that they already had intrinsic motivation to engage in, that you're actually depleting their motivation. Let me give you an example of this. There was, some years ago, a program, you might have been involved in it. It was rolled out by Pizza Hut, and they were hoping to try to increase kids' desire to read and their motivation to read. So what they did is they offered coupons for personal pan pizzas for each book that a child would read. So there's a story that some have told about a girl who used to love to read. She did love to read. And then she was in a school where this pizza program for reading was rolled out. And suddenly her reading behavior changed. She used to read for fun, right? It was an intrinsically rewarding kind of activity that she engaged in. And then suddenly now she wanted to get those personal pan pizzas for Pizza Hut. And so she was reading shorter books, and she wasn't really thinking about enjoying the book and being involved in the book. It was more like, let me read the book so I can get the pizza. So this is an example of how cognitive evaluation theory is at play in this example of this girl, because she had enjoyed reading. She had some intrinsic motivation to read before. And what happened was, by allocating the extrinsic rewards of these personal pan pizza coupons, her motivation to read went down. It changed. Her motivation changed, and it really declined. And sadly, this reading program was removed, and so a lot of people, when their intrinsic motivation had already been taken away and replaced by extrinsic motivation, and then that was taken away, really the ultimate outcome might not have been all that great. It might have been just less reading overall. So this is a theory, so it doesn't mean that this is entirely true of every single behavior. There may be some behavior where we just need someone to kind of do it. And it might be something that it's hard to get intrinsically motivated to do. So there might be some tasks at work that are really boring and really horrible, and just by offering some sort of rewards, there's maybe no promise of having intrinsic motivation to do it, and so that might be something that could be offered. But by and large, this is something that people have found to be useful and kind of interesting to think about. You don't want to deplete people's intrinsic motivation on the job. This next theory we're going to talk about, goal setting, is very powerful and ultimately is free. I mean, it's free other than the time and effort that it takes to implement, but there's no extra bonuses being offered. It's just setting goals and keeping track of how people are accomplishing them. So one of the key elements about goal setting research is that you want to set goals that are specific and challenging. And so you might have heard of SMART goals, which really takes this idea of specific and challenging goals and kind of just fleshes it out just a bit more. So the idea is that you don't want to have these general goals that can't be measured, that aren't attainable or relevant to you, and don't have a time frame set to them. So, for example, when people say, oh, I'm going to lose weight at the beginning of the year, I'm going to lose weight, this is my goal. So, okay, that's not really a SMART goal, right? Because, I mean, it's smart for your health, but it's not smart using this acronym because it's not that specific. How much weight are you going to lose? It's not measurable, saying how much weight am I going to lose that where you can actually measure it, and is it attainable? If you have something that's much more specific, and it's realistic, then that's going to be something that you're going to be more likely to achieve. It should be relevant to you. It shouldn't just be something that, oh, I think I probably should lose weight. If it's something that really maybe is important to you because of the fact that you're trying to improve your health outcomes, or maybe there's something that you can't do unless you do lose weight, like maybe there's a certain a knee replacement, or maybe there's an outfit you want to wear, something that's really relevant to you. That relevance is going to make that goal stronger. And there should be some time sense to it to make it time bound. So it should be where you could say, in 3 months I want to lose 5 pounds, or whatever it might be. So you start to be much more specific. So that's really important. And then another piece to this puzzle of goal setting that I want to share with you is something that's interesting, that there's some research that's been found that shows that if you actually assign goals to an employee, it can be as effective as when an employee and the supervisor are involved in setting the goals together. So this is, but I have to explain a little bit more about how and why this works. So traditionally, people had thought that it would be much more effective if you could have employees and supervisors involved in sharing goal setting, so that therefore employees were involved in sharing goal setting with their supervisors, so then those goals were more meaningful. And that was the school of thought. But then when some researchers did some work and saw that if you had to assign a goal, sometimes a goal is coming from headquarters, or it's something that's just important to achieve in order to keep the organization afloat. If you assign a goal, but in the course of assigning it, you explain why, and you kind of tell and sell. They call this the tell and sell approach to assigning goals, where you are not only just telling the employee what the assigned goals are, but you're selling them on it. You're saying why it's important, what it's going to do, how it's going to help the person. And by giving that sort of detail, it seems that you can get to the same level of effectiveness as if you were able to have that employee be involved in sharing and goal setting. Certainly, employees most likely would prefer to have some say in their goal setting, but if it can't be done, there's this tell and sell approach that could be as effective. So goal setting is incredibly inexpensive. It's something that research has also shown that people just like to have to see if they have the challenge of actually trying to achieve a goal. They don't necessarily have to be paid for it or anything like that. Just there's something about having a goal to shoot for, to try to aim for, to really kind of fuel where you're directing your efforts, that can be really powerful in increasing performance. So this is really a great one. And last but not least, in this video, we're going to talk about self-efficacy theory. So maybe when you were a child, or maybe another time in your life, you've heard of this little engine that could, if you think you can, or if you think you can, you can, if you think you can, you can. Or maybe it said, I think I think I can, right? But the way we can kind of rephrase that for self-efficacy theory is to say that this theory really gets at the idea that if you think you can, you can. So the idea is that the more that you have a belief in your capability to accomplish something, that belief actually fuels your level of performance. So if you think you can, you have that belief that you can do something, you actually are more likely to do it. Your performance will actually show that belief. It'll actually follow through in that belief. Now that's great, and that sounds nice and positive, right? But where this comes into play in terms of being useful is that you want to think about what you can do, first of all, for yourself and for others in trying to increase self-efficacy, because if you believe you can do something, then you'll go out there and do it. So how can you do that? There are actual specific ways to increase self-efficacy. This is almost like a recipe, but each of these 4 components, each of them is powerful in their own way. So to start us off, let's talk about inactive mastery. The idea with inactive mastery is that if people can practice what it is that they need to do, that practice will help to fuel their self-efficacy, which will in turn increase their performance. So that's where training comes into play. If people can practice in a training sort of setting what it is that they might need to do on the job, that can give them a sense of inactive mastery, which will then allow them to go out there and do a good job. Also, there may be some simulation kind of activities that also can help with that. So for example, in a nursing program, imagine you're trying to learn to be a nurse. Instead of, even if a nurse that someone's training to be a nurse, even if they think they really want to be a nurse, there might be some level of not knowing if you can actually do it when a patient's in front of you. So what a lot of nursing programs do is they have a simulation lab. So they have a lab with some dummies, like pretend people, and they have some ways of making these dummies talk and cough and do different things that a patient might do, but students can learn and kind of make the mistakes or do whatever they might do in the course of trying to be stronger in their beliefs that they can be a nurse with these dummies before they actually go out there and work with real people. And so the more that you can do that, the better off that you'll be in terms of increasing your self-efficacy. Another way to increase self-efficacy is through vicarious modeling. So as you may know, vicarious has to do with kind of living through someone else. So if you can watch someone else do something, you can imagine yourself in their shoes, and you can think about how you too could do a good job. So for example, my first job out of college involved having to call people at really high levels in pharmaceutical companies and hospitals and ask them questions about their specific hospitals and pharmaceutical companies' practices. And so in a sense, I was asking them to reveal secrets to someone just flat out of college. So that could be seen as somewhat scary, but what they had me do before actually calling these people was to watch other 22-year-olds just how they approached the phone call, how they framed their request. And by watching this, I thought to myself after watching it at first, hey, I can do this. And so that increased my self-efficacy and allowed me to do okay on the job. So that's vicarious modeling. So anytime you can watch someone, maybe it can be on it, even if it's not a live person, it might be a video, but the more that you can watch someone that maybe has some similarity to you, that can increase your level of self-efficacy. So let's turn to verbal persuasion now. This is the idea that you want, if you're trying to increase someone else's self-efficacy, you want them to make a connection between something that they have in terms of skills and experience and their performance. So you might be in a situation where there's an employee that works for you, and this employee is about to get a promotion to being a manager. And that employee might think to themselves, oh, can I do this job? They may not be saying this out loud, but maybe you have a sense that you could do something to help with their self-efficacy as a manager. So you might use verbal persuasion by, for example, saying, you have already been leading team meetings. And when you think about some of the things that you've done when you've led team meetings, those are exactly the same skills that you're going to need when you're a manager. So you've already had to figure out time schedules and role allocations and how to motivate people. And you did all of that when I was on vacation and I needed you to step in as a team leader temporarily, and you did an excellent job. So you showed those skills already, so you're going to do great in this new job. So you are making that linkage for them between something that they've done in the past and something that they need to do in the future, so they can see how they're going to be able to do a good job. So that's verbal persuasion. And that might be confused with the next one, but they're different. So the next and last point in terms of ways to increase self-efficacy is arousal. And so what arousal has to do, it's more like cheerleading. It's more like pumping up or psyching up someone to do a good job. So this is where, for example, I arrived at a department store once and got there just as they were opening, so I was one of the first people in to the department store. And I witnessed a manager with a group of employees, and what that manager was doing is essentially, it was almost like a sports team where they were saying, let's go out there, let's sell a lot, let's show excellent customer service. And it was really not about any specific skills or background experience. It was more like, let's do it, let's go out there and let's do an awesome job. It was really more like cheerleading. And so that's arousal, kind of the pumping up, whereas verbal persuasion is more of that making the argument between someone's past skills and experience and what they might need to do in the future. So this is something you can go out there and do tomorrow, today, in trying to convince others that they can. And if they think they can, then they should be able to do it. Hope this has been helpful to you.